What's up, y'all? It's TCustomz. I just finished up this new sample beat, and I want to step you guys through a little bit of the process and different elements that went into this beat. So normally, when I do a sample beat, I start with the sample, and then I chop it up, and then I start trying to make sequence with the sample. I didn't know what I was going to do with this sample, so I went ahead and laid a drum track down first just to get a rhythm going, and then started working with the samples and figure out exactly how I wanted to piece it together. So for the drums, started out with a kick and a snare, and for the kick, I actually have two different kicks layered. I have like a gritty vinyl sounding kick, and then I have one that has more low end punch to it. So I just combine those to get that kick. And then for the snare, I kind of did the same thing. I have one that has more vinyl, more grit to it, and then I layered it with one that had more of a snap or punch to it. So normally what I do with my kick and snare, I usually run a parallel compression. For this one, I didn't do any kind of compression with these. These sounded good enough to me, as is. And then another thing I did with my drum track was I layered a clap on the second snare of every 4 bars. I layered a clap. This is kind of what the clap sounds like. So for the sample, this is a little snippet of what the sample sounds like, the original sample. So you might be familiar with the sample. I thought I was going to use a lot of this part right here in the intro. I didn't use as much of it as I thought in the actual beat. So I chopped this up. I had like a lot of chops because again I didn't know what I was going to do. I think I had like 80 some chops on this. So I just went through and basically picked a bunch of pieces, just cut it up. And I wound up pitching it down a little bit. So I did a lot of variation. The final beat has a lot of like little details, just little changes, so I can't really replay it all. So I just play a little bit of it just to get a feel for what it kind of sounded like, or what it sounds like. So unless something like how it works with the drums. So after I had this sequence down, the main sequence down, then I added hi-hats, drums with the hi-hats. And for the hats, all I did is add a little bit of reverb to it. I used some stock sounds that I had. So with the sample. Okay, now for the bass line. So a lot of my earlier beats, I used to use a technique called low-end theory to do my bass line, and producers are probably familiar with that. Sample-based producers are probably familiar with that technique. And basically, the low-end theory uses the bass line from the sample that you're using. And normally, if I was going to do a low-end theory, what I would do is I would duplicate after I lay out my sampled sequences, I would duplicate that track, then put a filter on it to filter all the high frequencies out. So you're just left with the bass part of it. And then normally what you can do is just add an EQ to it, like if you wanted to emphasize certain low frequencies so the bass stands out more. But the issue you can run into with low end theory is, depending on the kind of sound you're going for, but a lot of times the reason that I don't use it as much anymore is because it can kind of muddy up your low end sometimes. I guess if you're good enough with it, you can, if you become proficient at it, you can, make it where it sounds pretty clear. And plus you don't have any flexibility over it. You're left basically with what bass is being used in the sample. So what I do is kind of a variation of it. For a lot of my tracks, I start out duplicating the sample track and putting a filter on it to filter all the high frequencies, and then I can get a feel for what the bass is doing. I can hear the bass, and then I usually load in a virtual instrument and then replay maybe exactly the way it is, or maybe I'll vary it a little bit. Plus it gives me more flexibility if I wanted to change it and didn't have to be exact. But I like it, for clarity. It seems to come through better in the mix than using low end theory, and 2 gives me flexibility if I want to change it up, if I want to do anything different with it. So for this track, that's what I did. I started out with, this is really muddy. This is the sample track, but this has got a filter. This has got a filter to filter all the high frequencies, and then I put an EQ to EQ some of the lower frequencies to give me more, to get a better, to hear it better. So I get an idea for it, then I replayed it, and again, it wasn't exactly like it, but I used that as a basis. So the bass is kind of low. It may not come through in the speakers. You may have to hear it in the final mix. I'll play at the end. Okay, so other than that, drums, hi-hats, sample, and bass line, the only thing else that I added to it was I added a synth for the hook. I'm using a VST called Omnisphere. Spectrasonics makes a VST called Omnisphere. It's excellent. I recommend it to. It's really good for any kind of music, I think. I mean, I use it in hip hop and R&B and pop stuff, but I mean, you can use it for special effects and all kinds of stuff. So this was the sound that I liked. I've used this sound before. Kind of like a lead sound. So that's just kind of like a little bit of how it goes. Again, you can hear the full and the final mix. That's really all there was to the beat. Like I said, there was a lot of work. I spent a lot of time on the chops because what I played was pretty easy, but you'll hear in the final track, it's got like a lot of little stuff with panning and just like a lot of little stuff. So that's it. You'll hear the final mix. This beat is available for release on my website. It's www.TCustomz.com. It's TCustomz.com. It'll be in the description. If you like the video, make sure to leave a comment and subscribe, rate it, and I'll be back with something else. Maybe another beat making video or whatever. If you have something in particular you're looking for, you want me to put up, just shoot me a message. Anyway, that's all I have for y'all. Thanks for watching. Peace.
This is a TCustomz production.